Hi guys, here we've got week 5 worksheet. We're going to walk through this together. These first 4 problems, as you can see, we're solving for equations with one variable. Let's start with something like number 2, where we see k being divided by 8 plus 10 equals 12. So one key thing to do when we're manipulating equations like this, we always are going to start with our addition and subtraction, kind of going backwards from your PEMDAS order of operations things. Because this, since it's being divided, we're going to have to multiply, and that might make some things more complicated if we work on that first. So I'm going to start with my 2 columns. Not very straight there. My 2 columns. And I'm going to, I see that positive 10, and in order to bring it over to the other side, I have to minus 10 on both sides, okay? Now I've got k over 8 equals 2, because that's 12 minus 10, okay? Now I've got this k being divided by 8. As you noticed, I subtracted 10 to cancel out the positive 10. So I'm doing opposite operations. Since k is being divided by 8, I need to do the opposite operation, which is multiply by an 8 on both sides. That's going to cancel this fraction 8 and leave me with k on that side. And 2 times 8 is just 16. And you are done. Okay. These other twos, number 3 and 4, notice we've got the parentheses, so you're going to have to make sure that you distribute that 6, distribute that 8, and when you distribute, you use multiplication, okay? Moving on to look at solving these quadratic equations. So these are things you might have seen before, but are a little rusty in. So when we've got powers like this, the opposite of a power of an exponent is square root. So just like how if you add, you're going to subtract and vice versa. So I'm going to put double arrows. If you multiply, the opposite is divide. For exponents, so I'm going to say, let's say a to the x power, its opposite is a to the square root of x there. Okay, so let's start out with number 5. X squared equals 81, and I want to figure out what is just x equal to. Now you might be able to reason in your head knowing that 9 times 9 is 81, and 9 squared is that same thing, so that must mean x equals 9. But if you didn't know that off the top of your head, know that if I had this x squared equals 81, I need to square root both things, and that leaves me with just an x. This square root and the exponent will cancel each other out. And use your calculator to find the square root of 81, which is 9. Okay? Something like number, I was going to do 7, but maybe let's do 9 first instead. So 9, we see these two terms kind of like 8 and 10. So just like how we did up here, we're going to do our simple parts first, like our addition and subtraction, and then we're going to go on to multiply, divide, and or doing our square roots, okay? So starting with my column, I see my negative 10, so I'm going to add 10 to cancel. And now I've got 25x squared is equal to 25. Now here, I'm going to get rid of my 25 that's attached to my x by dividing it. And I've got x squared equals 1, and I square root it to cancel that exponent, square root of 1. And remember that whenever you square root a 1, it's equal to 1. And you're done, okay? So practice that with the rest of the problems there. If you have other, if you need more help, then we'll go over a few more in our Zoom class, okay? Here we see the distance formulas, so don't get too scared. We've written it all out for you. This is the distance formula, where distance d is equal to x2 minus x1. Those are your coordinates, x1, x2 here, squared, plus y2 minus y1, also part of your coordinates, squared, and then square root the entire thing, okay? So as we see here, we've got it laid out for you. Here's your one set of coordinates, x1 and y1, your second set of coordinates, x2, y2, and let's try plugging it into our distance formula. So distance is going to equal the square root of x2, which is -1, minus x1, which is 0, squared, plus y2, which is -7, minus y1, which is 5, squared. Next step. Order of operations tells me do inside of my parentheses. So -1 minus 0 is still just -1 squared. Plus, we've got -7, -5. Since they're both negatives, they're going to kind of add together and become a bigger negative. So think of it as 7 plus 5, which is 12. And since they're both negatives, it's a -12 squared. Okay, now you get to use your calculator. And we're going to do this step. 1 or -1 squared, same thing as -1 times a -1 is 1. -12 squared is -12 times -12, which is 144. Okay. Now when I add those together, I get 145. And I'm kind of stuck there, right? You've got your square root of 145, and maybe you put it into your calculator and notice you've got a long decimal that is 12.04. I'm going to round to that nearest hundredth there. And you are done, okay? Pythagorean theorem, you might have seen this before. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, okay? So we're going to use this formula to find a missing side of a triangle. This is what you use that for, and precisely it's for a right triangle, okay? So only triangles that have a right angle like this, and your legs are A, B, and your hypotenuse, that long diagonal side, is always C, okay? So let's try out number 15. All I have to do is plug it into my equation. A is 3, and I have to square it, plus b, which is 4, and I'm going to square it, and then c squared is my unknown. Using your calculator, 3 times 3, 3 squared is 9, plus 4 times 4 is 4 squared, which is 16, equals c squared. 9 plus 16 is 25. Okay, now I have this squared. I need to get just c without it. So remember, opposite of my exponent, I use square root. Take your calculator, calculating square root of 25. C is equal to 5. Okay, that's all that is. Just plug it in and find your answer. Okay, solve for your variable that you need. Okay, the last problem on here is a word problem. And one person is using Pythagorean theorem. The other person is using distance formula. So I'm going to want you to try out both methods, okay? And it's all given here in the picture and in your equations. And then write about how were they similar, how were they different, which method did you like best, okay? So try that out. Come in on Tuesday for class and we can talk about it, okay? Have a great week and see you on Tuesday.